Today, we're talking about some upcoming free agents that the Washington Commanders could take a big swing on. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that like, hit that subscribe, and follow the channel as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football daily. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are taking a look at some free agents that the Washington Commanders might want to take a big swing on. And so we're going to look at two free agents that are upcoming that are going to be on offense, and then we're going to talk about one on defense. And so starting with offense, I think that the Washington Commanders might want to consider bringing in Kyle Pitts at the tight end position. And so, look, Kyle Pitts is coming off a very good season with the Atlanta Hawks. In fact, he had the most touchdowns in his career this last season, and he also had the most catches in his career this last season. And so, last season, for Kyle Pitts, played in 17 games. He had 118 targets, 88 receptions, 928 yards, a 10.5 average, and 5 touchdowns. And so Kyle Pitts, again, coming off a very good year. And this is playing with two quarterbacks because remember, Michael Penix Jr., he got injured, and then Kirk Cousins had to step in. And so Kyle Pitts had a very good year. And so why take a big swing with Kyle Pitts? And so I think that with the Washington Commanders offense, I think that when you go back and you take a look at that team that went ahead and got into the NFC Championship game, they had some very good play from Zach Ertz. And so Zach Ertz unfortunately got injured. Not sure what the status is going to be with him this upcoming season. And also, too, I'm not sure that we got a whole bunch of answers about who Ben Sinnott is as a tight end. And so I think that the Washington Commanders really need to address this in either free agency or the NFL draft. And I think that, look, if you want to get a player that certainly fits your timeline, then I think that you would want to take a look here at Kyle Pitts. And I just love the fact that when you get Kyle Pitts over on this offense, just thinking about it, 6'6", 250, I think that that would be terrific when you're talking about the red zone targets that he could snag from Jayden Daniels. And also, too, what I love about Kyle Pitts is his versatility. And so his ability to line up as a wide receiver, he also can line up just as a tight end there in the three-point stance. He's a good pass blocker as well. And I just think that by moving him around, you really put a lot of pressure on defenses here. And so I just think that if you are trying to get to the next level with Jayden Daniels, you get him another tight end like this with Kyle Pitts. And I think that also, too, even if you do go ahead and sign Kyle Pitts and take the chance, because I do think that this is a big swing because we're talking about players that you're going to have to certainly pay a little money to, but it could be worth it. I think that even if the Commanders go ahead and draft a tight end, you still have Kyle Pitts there to go ahead and take over while that tight end is getting ready. And so I think that this would be a prime move if you want to go ahead and ramp things up with this offense. And so, I think that that is the first player that the Washington Commanders might want to take a chance on in free agency. And then next, I think another player that the Washington Commanders might want to take a chance with in free agency here is going to be Breece Hall. And so not saying that the running back position was bad for the Washington Commanders. In fact, I thought it was great with what we had with Chris Rodriguez Jr. Hopefully they bring him back. And also, too, with Bill, he's great as well. I certainly think that either one of these players can be RB1. And in fact, at this point in time, when you're talking about RB1, most NFL teams, you have, many running backs that can get it done for you. And so I just think that the bottom line is that the more running backs that you have that can do, things out of the backfield or run the football, and, they're excellent at pass blocking and everything else, just the more versatile your offense is. And so I certainly think that we're going to see some more from Bill and hopefully Chris Rodriguez Jr. if he comes back. But man, what an upgrade too at the running back position, for this team if they are able to bring in Breece Hall. And so I've been talking about the fact that I think that this team is going to need a pass catching, a running back out of the backfield. And they also need, a player that can also run the football as well. And I think that Breece Hall would be a terrific pickup here for the Washington Commanders. And so, again, I think that this would be a big swing. I think the Jets have come out and said that they would like to go ahead and keep him, but let's see what happens here. And so, this last season, 16 games played, 243 yards. He had over 1,000 yards. He had a 4.4 average and 4 touchdowns. And then as far as receiving out of the backfield, 36 receptions on 48 targets, 350 yards, 9.7 was the average, and 1 touchdown. And so just going back to what I was talking about there with Kyle Pitts, you are talking about making your offense more versatile, and that's exactly what we want to see in this next version of this team. We want to see a team that is not predictable. You are moving, players around in different formations and things like that, and you are just putting a lot of stress on defenses. And if you think about that, just think about how much of an upgrade that would be, to the running backs. And then you also have the mobility with Jaden Daniels. That is a scary team. And then you're talking about if you do bring in a guy like Kyle Pitts, or you bring in another wide receiver, either via the draft or free agency, that is an offense that is going to be very tough to stop. And so I think that that would be another big swing here, is bringing in a guy like Breece Hall. And so lastly, looking at the defense, and I've said this before, defensively, this team is going to have to try to figure something out. And I think that they're going to have to find a way to get off just these 1-year type of deals. They need to find some players that fit a little bit more with the timeline that you can go ahead. And I'm not going to say just necessarily develop, some players that have shown some promise, but can really take that next step, with this franchise. And so, I think the cornerback position is going to be a position that you're going to have to figure out here. And so who knows what's going to happen with Jonathan Jones. I think he was on a 1-year deal. And I think that you have something, with Trey Amos here. I think that you have to find something else to go with him and Mikey Samra still. And so I do think that this team would be looking for a corner in the draft, but I also think that there's the potential that maybe you go after a corner that would fit your timeline and certainly brings a lot of juice to your roster with his experience. And I'm talking about Jaylen Watson here. And so Jaylen Watson played with the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, I know he doesn't have a ton of interceptions. He had 2 interceptions this last season with the Kansas City Chiefs. He had 42 solo tackles in this last season. And so the most, he did get injured there towards the end. He had 1 interception in year 1. But what I like with him is the consistent play that you get with him. You're looking at a player that you can put in man-to-man situations. You can put him into zone as well. And I think that you can trust that he is going to be solid on a down-to-down type of situation. And I think that that's what you want, with this defense. You want a player that is steady. You don't want a player that, they can't really do this or they can't really do that. I think that he's even across the board as a corner. He gives you some length. He gives you some speed. But what I like about Jaylen Watson is something that you cannot measure with the stats. He is a player that has gone deep into the playoffs, and he's a Super Bowl champion. And I think that because of that, that's something that you just can't put a stat on. And I think that that's what you want when you're talking about building your culture, right? You want to get to that winning type of franchise. You want a player that has done it there with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that you would take a swing here with Jaylen Watson. And so, I think that all of these players young enough to fit your timeline. And so Jaylen Watson, 27, Breece Hall, at the time of this podcast recording, 24, and then with Kyle Pitts, 25. And so all players have, dealt with a little bit of injuries with their career, especially Breece Hall and Kyle Pitts, but they have bounced back very well. And I think that these are big swings because they would command a little bit of money here from the Washington Commanders, but it might be worth it for the Commanders if they are trying to go ahead and get themselves back, to an NFC championship game and beyond. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here, what are you guys thinking Would you like to bring in Jaylen Watson, an experienced cornerback there from the Kansas City Chiefs? Would you like to bring Breece Hall over to go along with Bill and also to Chris Rodriguez Jr. in the backfield? Imagine what that would look like to go along with Jaden Daniels. Man, it would be scary with those RPOs out there. And also, to the tight end position. I think that is something that the Commanders are going to have to address, either in the draft or free agency. Cal Pitts is out there. We've talked about Isaiah Likely. I think that both of those players would be players that would fit the scheme here for the Washington Commanders. You can imagine the versatility that you get there at the tight end position. Again, just going back to that NFC Championship run, this was a team that relied, I think, on the tight end position with Zach Ertz. And so who knows what's going to happen? Zach Ertz unfortunately got injured this season, and I just haven't seen too much from Ben Sinnott. Now, that's not to say that is not what the Washington Commanders are going to do in their plans. We don't know. Maybe they do feel like that Ben Sinnott is going to be tight end one. I just didn't see too much there down the stretch. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what the Washington Commanders would do. Would they take a big swing on any of these three free agents? Love to hear what you're thinking. And as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you on the next one. All right, peace.